Sounds good. That's awesome.
Yep. All right. Welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Jacob Dahlin. I'm your host today and every day. But today's guest, dual citizen, Swiss Canadian, now head coach in Boden, Dion Antisin. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jacob. Real excited to be on here. It's, I've listened to a few episodes now, so I'm really excited to be a part of this, and I love what you're doing here. So
yeah,
really
thanks.
Excited.
So referral from previous guest that will be released just a little bit before this one, Nicholas Carlson, who's your assistant coach in J20, but head coach in J18.
Yeah. So Nick and I, we actually work together in the office here. But yeah, very close relationship. We really want to integrate that J20, J18 culture. So we've been working a lot together, and it just made sense for him to help out as an assistant coach when he can and be on the bench with me and at practice. So yeah.
Pretty impressive young man. He's going places, that's for sure. So so let's talk about your background first, because you got a unique background, not just because you're a Canadian coach in Sweden, but give it a little bit. So I'll give a little perspective on this podcast. We've recorded over 80 episodes now, and a little bit of history with Boden, because we had Henry Akers, who I think was GM or coach up there. It was early on last year. We recorded him, and so he's a Canadian that was coaching in Sweden. Bryant Perrier from Penticton, Canada, which is south of where you're from. Yeah. Who's coaching in Åmål. So it's a little bit of a history of Canadians now coaching in Sweden, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But your background, because you know, if you go to Elite Prospects, Antisin, Antisin, for you that want to look him up. But you're born in Lugano, Switzerland.
Originally, I was actually born in Canada, in Kelowna. But at 3 months old, I was on my first international flight over to Switzerland. My dad played professional hockey for just around 20 years. So that kind of lifestyle was kind of normal for me right from the start. I got to go to, NLA games, National League games in Switzerland from pretty much 3 months old till I was 9. Lived in that culture, lived in that environment for my whole life now. But growing up, it was definitely interesting. Winters in Switzerland, summers in Canada, and especially Kelowna. It's a beautiful place. So it was a pretty.
I've heard so much. When you talk and listen to other people talking about, what was your best year in professional hockey, and there's like, well, you can't beat you can't beat living in Switzerland. I wish I would have done 3 more years there, is what people say.
It's a beautiful country. I mean, it's small. Like, the travel was nothing when I played there, and when I lived there, like 4 hours and you're across the whole country, or you're in, another place, whether it's France, Italy, Germany, or Austria or something. Like, everything was so close, but you got everything in Switzerland. It was, the mountains, you got the landscapes, just that style of life that they're very relaxed there. They're very intense about hockey, but it's
disappeared there for me.
Did I lose you?
Yep. So
we're back.
That's all right. We got a little bit of a bad connection. We'll cut it out a little bit. So let me ask you too. So when did you grow? How long did you live in Switzerland, or when did your dad move back home?
My dad had a knee injury when I was 9 years old, so we moved back to Canada permanently after that.
So
Um,
so you actually started skating and playing youth hockey in Switzerland.
yeah, yeah. So I spent my first couple years in Zug, following my dad's career,
Yeah.
and then did most of my time in Lugano. It was about 4 years in Lugano from 4 to 8, and then it was kind of ended in Geneva, which was the French part there. But yeah, that
Not
was pretty much the winners for me, which was pretty cool.
not too not bad places to grow up.
No,
So
not at all.
and then you moved. So your dad, is he from, because if we look at kind of your where exactly is Notre Dame Hounds housed? Is that in Penticton?
Oh, I lost you again.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Yeah, my dad was born in Vancouver,
okay.
but both his parents were European descent. So his dad was Croatian and came over during the war, and then my grandma was Swiss, who also came over just after the war, and then they met up in Canada. And he took advantage of the Swiss citizenship right away. Got over there after his WHL career. He tried out with the Boston Bruins, I believe, and when he didn't make that team, he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to Europe." So from
And
there, it
but
was easy for him.
so what about in Canada? Where is he from? Other than Vancouver, I mean, because I know he's got a history with Notre Dame, and you do too. But where exactly is that?
He pretty much played all his minor hockey in Vancouver. Then he went to the WHL, and I believe it was the Victoria Cougars back in the day. That he played for 3 years with. And then before the WHL, he played 1 year at junior with the Kelowna Buckaroos,
Okay.
which both are teams that don't exist anymore. I think Victoria went up to Prince George, became the Prince George Cougars, and then Kelowna Buckaroos just, I think, dissolved or became the West Side Warriors, maybe.
So how did he end up? So Notre Dame's in. I'm looking it up here now. Wilcox, Canada, which is in Saskatchewan, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily right next door to Vancouver.
No, no, I don't think he was ever in Notre Dame at any point.
Oh, okay. So how did you end up there?
Um, I had an opportunity to go, and just get out of Kelowna, and I was naturally a kid that just liked to try different things. Growing up, traveling all the time, it was kind of you know s- tough to just stay in Kelowna, and so I got the opportunity to go to Notre Dame.
And
Um,
and that's a prep school, boarding school there in
yeah,
Saskatchewan, right?
yeah, in Saskatchewan, yeah, it's prestigious hockey school with a great education program. So, there's been some notable names that have gone through: Barry
Just a few.
Trotz, Rob Brendamore, and so Jaden Schwartz, Dylan Dubé right now in the NHL. So there's a lot of names out of that one.
Well, I'm in North Carolina, so we hear a lot about Brenda Moore and him growing up there um and making a name for himself before he went
Mhm.
to turn pro. So
Mhm.
so what age were you when you first, were you like 15 when you moved out there?
Yeah, yeah, 15. So it would have been my first year of U18. Um, I actually went there with high hopes of making the AAA team that won Telus, but I actually ended up playing single A hockey my first year.
Yeah.
Worked my way through for 3 years, single A, double A, then triple A, and then junior. I played 2.5 years, I guess, there as well.
Yeah, and I mean, so let's talk a little bit about your junior career, because I mean, uh, so in the CCHL, so the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, Notre Dame Hounds has a team there
Mhm.
in that and plays Humboldt, and
Yeah.
that's a pretty dang good league.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very good league. I mean, Battleford was in the finals last year, um, and they were almost undefeated during our season. It was an incredible team to coach against, and just to watch them play was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And when I played, Yorkton was one of the top teams in Canada. They won the RBC Cup the 1 year. They were Western Cup team the year before, and so it was a really good league at that point as well.
And,
It
and,
was
and we
tough
want
though.
and we want to mention too that this is not too far, not too long ago, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah, this would have
reality,
been
I mean,
about 10 years ago.
yeah, 10 years ago. I mean, you're a young guy, and
Yeah.
and now we'll talk about your coaching career in a second.
Mm,
But what's your opinion of, we haven't on the podcast, we really haven't talked too much about the Canadian juniors. We've talked more about the North American juniors, but specifically now when the BCHL is open up for Europeans.
mhm.
So when you were playing in the Saskatchewan juniors, for those who don't know, there's no Europeans allowed to play unless
Yeah.
you've done like 3 years of prep school, or you could have went to like Notre Dame,
Mhm.
go to prep, and then you get you can go that route. But if you look at, and there's not a lot of Europeans in the junior A's.
No, no, and in the CJ there is a rule. I don't know how many or how it works, but yeah, there's a rule against just bringing in import players from that area
Yeah.
or outside of North America.
What's your opinion out of the so take out BCHL for a second.
Mhm,
But you've got the OHL, WHL, and the Q, which is tier one
mhm.
in Canada. But that second level we always kind of considered, okay, BCHL has been this beast of its own for a while, right? And
Yeah.
then you got, what would you consider? I mean, AJHL being the second strongest, and maybe Saskatchewan juniors third, or
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of every year it changes. I
yeah,
mean Brooks Bandits have been solid for a long time now.
yeah,
But the OJ has really good teams and players that come out of there. There's players that come out of the CC all the time, the Central Canadian, I think it's called.
yeah.
The Maritimes on the East Coast there have some great teams. So as a like a whole level, that tier two has really good players and teams that compete each year for now the Centennial Cup, which is, the best team from every province meets up in a place and plays for the cup. So it's always good games. There's some blowouts here and there, but most of the players that go there are dominant players at the junior level.
What was it like for you? So going into Notre Dame, I mean, that's a elite. That's
Mhm.
where one of the top teams, and everybody goes there hoping to go to the NHL, right?
Mhm.
At what point did you start thinking about juniors, and how was that making that transition for you to say, and did you get drafted in the SJHL, or how does that work in the junior A?
Um, yeah, so the draft for the SJ is just Saskatchewan-born players playing in Saskatchewan. They get drafted to Saskatchewan teams. But for me, I remember I went to two BCHL camps and was talking to a few other teams at the time, and I was just, I wanted to go to a couple teams. I think it was Nanaimo and Powell River were the two teams that I went to, and yeah, I love the island of Vancouver, so I was just like, you know what, I want to go out there. Um, Ended up not making either team, and I remember at that point I was like, what am I gonna do? So I called the junior coach at Notre Dame, Kevin White, who coached there for a while, and I was like, you know what? Do you still have a spot that I can earn? Like I'll come try out this and that. And he's like, yep, you're gonna earn it every step of the way. And for me, for him taking me back there, it was phenomenal. I think I really played the way that he liked it, which was just a tough two-way power forward. I wasn't going to be the guy that scored a nice goal. I think none of my goals came from outside of 10 feet. But I was just a hard player to play against and, earn my spot, as I would
Well,
say.
so let's give a little perspective too. Your profile says 6 foot 194, so not a little guy, right?
Nope.
And first year, well, not counting the two games in the
Mhm.
11, 12, but first year, real year, 53 games, 36 points, not too shabby, 148 pins.
Yeah, yeah. So I just had to, go out and make a name for myself was my mentality. So I went out there and I was a dick of a hockey player. That's the easiest way to put it. and I had to fight a few times and do whatever it took. But it's a tough league, that SJ.
Yeah.
So I know that you know I'm not a small guy, but I went up against quite bigger guys, and I didn't always win the fights, but the guys loved it that I played for, and I was always kind of like a spark. If the team needed it, I would go out and do something that just got everybody, back into the game or something. So that was a blast for me. I love that kind of game. So
A little
yeah,
marshy, a little
yeah,
marshy.
kind of like that. Yeah,
What about, all right, and then I see here Austin Bruins, which is in Minnesota, right?
yeah.
Wait,
So,
so that's a little bit of a detour there. How did you end up playing 6 games with them in the Null?
so that summer I actually got drafted to Waterloo, Iowa, in the
Okay.
USHL. Um, Ended up
Wow.
going down there for the start of the season. Got injured late in training camp. Um, Stuck around for another couple weeks. One of the games that my first was going to be my first game back. I got injured in the practice before, so I was out again for another couple weeks.
Lost you again.
Had some
Oh,
games before you come back.
I lost
Oh,
you there for a second. So you said you got injured there?
yeah. So I got injured the second time just before what was supposed to be my first game, and after I came back from that one, the coach just told me that, I need to see you play again. I need to get you back in shape. Like you haven't really done enough. So I was okay, go down to Austin. Chris Talk was the coach there at the time, who was, a pretty big name for the NAHL. And when I went down there, I was, excited, played the 6 games, really enjoyed my time there. And then when I went back to Waterloo, it was the Christmas break, so met with the coach, PK O'Hanley, and he was like, "You know what? We got our imports now. We're kind of full. Like I can move you, or we can send you back. You can go to Austin." And he gave me a few options, and being away from home at 19 and injured and all that stuff, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go with what I know. And after Christmas, I went back to Notre Dame. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a whirlwind of 4.5 months for me there.
So how would you describe the difference between SJ and Null? A little bit older
Oh,
league in the Null, right? More older players.
yeah. Yeah, it was the same kind of like tough style of play. What I really noticed, and this is going back 10 years, and I think the NA has taken a big step since, was most teams you played either had a top line or top two lines, and then it kind of was like a rough, tough game for the bottom two lines. Like there were some tough guys out there that, could take you out if you weren't ready. But I think now the NA has turned into more of a four-line skilled league that dominates.
Yeah. A
And
little
I
bit of
think
diff
they've
it's a
taken.
it's a little bit of difference between North and South.
Hmm.
In especially the South is probably a little bit more, if you're looking at the average size player in the South versus the North, it's a little bit of difference.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I was only in the North, and I only played the Northern teams, and there were some Minnesota boys that could play the puck, and they moved it well. So it was really cool to be in the NA. And looking back, I probably should have stayed there, just because of what it's become today and how well it is progressing in junior hockey.
But at the same time, though, you got to look back at your career and been like,
Mhm.
yeah, from working yourself up from single A to double A to triple A to getting draft or getting in the freaking USHL. I mean, yeah, you've probably earned it, but
Mhm.
not a lot of people can um I mean, yeah, a little bit of role player probably, but at the same
Mhm.
time, that's pretty big accomplishment. Uh,
Yeah.
so then college for a couple of years, but and then you ended up in Switzerland. What didn't wasn't for you, or what was college? So you're probably then. How old were you then when you went to Concordia?
I would have been 21 at that time.
Okay,
And college was fun. the coach and I got along, but, the my style of player and his style of coach just wasn't working, so, decided to move on, and actually that summer, I was contemplating quitting hockey,
Yep.
um, and then the Vegas, UNLV, and University of Las Vegas GM reached out to me, he's like, "Hey, like, do you wanna come play for us? Heard through the grapevine that you were thinking of quitting," and I was like, "Sure, I'll go live in Vegas for a year, play hockey, go to school, see what life's about," and,
How
super fun.
yeah, how would you describe, that year of, people yes, there's a difference between NCAA and ACHA, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But and it is different, but it's still there's a lot of good ACHA teams, but what's the difference in the mentality of, right? You're going there because you did you get a restart or a spark of playing because less pressure
Yeah,
and that
it
kind of
wasn't
stuff?
even the pressure, it was just hockey became fun again,
Yeah.
and it was kinda crazy because I went there thinking that I was gonna be the hot shot NCAA, like, this
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that, but there were some good teams and good players that we played, we played Arizona State's club team. We played Arizona University, and there were some really good players on that. Like there was a Division 1 player that came back to Arizona to play.
Yep.
So there were some really good players in that level too. But it just reminded me why I play the game again. And
Awesome.
from there, I was like, you know what, I got to try. I got the dual citizen. I'm gonna go try and play in Europe. Um, and that's kind of what led me back to Switzerland.
Yeah. So how does that yeah, so you played a couple of years in Switzerland and was did you have was that because of the connections of that you kind of had already formed or like that itch of man, I can always go out there and have a different experience.
It never really crossed my mind until that last year, of college where I was like, "You know what? Like, as fun as ACHA was, it wasn't, gonna be for me long term." So I was like, I'm gonna try and go and make a career out of this." So
Yeah.
from there, I decided to, try and go to Switzerland. I had a tryout with, Zurich's farm team there, Kusnacht. Um, Stuck around for a bit and then went down to Geneva's farm team, which was Sion there,
Yeah.
and had a great year with another Canadian coach, Joby Messier, um, who brought me in and was like, "Yeah, you're gonna be the role player that you were in Canada, and you're gonna just." I don't. He actually told me in a conversation, he's like, "I don't care if you score a point this year. The way you play is gonna piss off everybody in Switzerland. So just go do your thing." And from there, I was having a blast. It was a great team. We made it second round of playoffs before the wheels kind of fell off for us. But it was an awesome time that first year there.
That's another thing I noticed about your profile really is, you know, lots of playoffs.
Mhm,
It's like there's players to have their entire career playing in the minus,
mhm.
right? But you've been able to be on teams that every year goes to the playoffs. That must be pretty fun, which
Yeah,
means you're winning a lot of games, right?
yeah, and for me that's where the season starts. That's where the fun begins because playoff hockey is a whole different than the
Yeah.
season. Like players really get to prove who they are as a hockey player in playoffs. So my goal every year was just make it to playoffs, and then we get to be the real beast of the playoffs and prove that, this is us. We're a top team. We can do this. So yeah, playoff hockey, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, so very, very interesting background uh and at some point you decided, all right, coaching is where I'm gonna talk about that transition to going back to say, I'm gonna go back and coach a prep team.
It wasn't easy. I'll say that. My last year of playing there, I actually ended up injuring my hip and fractured it through my pelvis. So it was kind of a yeah, you can't play anymore. I remember getting 3 opinions from doctors, and they were just like, you can't skate or else you're gonna be in a wheelchair if you keep on this route. So the decision to step away from hockey was tough there, March of my final season. And from there, I was just kind of lost for, a summer. What am I going to do? Do I got to go back to school? Am I going to do this? Am I going to work a construction job? And I think late July, I ended up calling an old the head of hockey at Notre Dame, Jeremy Millimuck at the time. And I was like, "Hey, do you want to be a reference for me on my resume?" And I'll send it. I'm gonna go to POE, Pursuit of Excellence, which is now Rink Kelowna, and I was gonna give them my resume. And he goes, "Nope, you're gonna get a job at Notre Dame because I'm gonna hire you right now and bring you in to be a coach." I was like, "Okay, that's easy enough." And so I think the next day I packed my stuff, drove out to Saskatchewan, and yeah, and then I started the CSSHL U15 assistant coach there.
Wow. So it was connections that you had already made before that.
Mhm,
So what's your relationship? How has your relationship with your dad going through this process of being a player, and since because he's been coaching too, right?
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
it
mean,
was,
because this was not like, hey, this wasn't handed to you by your dad's connections. This was your connections, right?
mhm.
But
Yeah,
how
exactly,
did
and
he guide you in this process?
oh, he still does. He's still a mentor for me to this day. Like, I usually call him up, every couple weeks. "Hey, I got this going on. You know what would you do in this situation? How would you handle this?" But, when I was, ending as a player, he kinda went through the same thing, a
Yep.
little bit more into his career, but I was just talking to him and I was like, I'm kind of lost right now. Like, what do I do?" And he's like, "You got to just do whatever feels right. If whether that's going back to school, going to work, or coaching, like just do what feels right and follow your path." Like I was 23 or 24 at the time, so it
Yeah.
was like, you're a man, you can figure this out. But if you get down to the tough questions now come to me and we'll find out. But he wanted me to make the mistakes and learn on my own. And we discussed that, I think, when I was going to Notre Dame, that you're going to make mistakes in your career. You're going to make choice mistakes. It's going to happen, but you have to make them so that you can't blame anyone else. It's on you, and you got to trust your heart and your gut. So, um,
But what a
I look
great
for
place.
guidance a lot.
But what a great place to be, though, is in a
Mhm.
in an environment where let's face it, that's not a um, that's a high profile place where you got good, really solid professionals around you,
Mhm.
and probably a mix of experience, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But it's a great training ground to be able to go in where you can actually also contribute, but also learn a ton by doing.
Mhm. Yeah, and like my dad's great for me because he wants me to come in with detailed questions for him. Why isn't this working? What have you tried? How can I help? And if it's whether my power play is not working, if it's not working, what have I tried? What haven't I tried? This or that, and he'll break it down. Okay, go simple, go simple. Try this, or I have this play or this thing in practice, drill in practice that you can do. And it's another voice that you get when you feel like you're running around.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then, so you did 4 years, and the last year there before this one was back with the junior team.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that was a
You-
phenomenal year with those guys. We had some really good players on that team. Jared Sitch, who's now at Mercyhurst College, NCAA Division One. We had Will Dawson, who's committed to Air Force NCAA and playing in the NA this year. So it was a fun year coaching those guys, those high skill, and there's other names that I could say in that list,
yeah.
but um, yeah, it was a blast to be able to go back and coach those 18, 19, 20-year olds that, they're there to make hockey as best they can and move and make it a career. but you're also able to have fun with them as, as adults.
Yeah. And so talk about your coach there. So Brett Pilkington,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. I mean, Brett and I still chat probably every couple days. We just talk hockey. He really kind of showed me probably my 4 years there. He was one of the guys that just took me under his wing and taught me how to be a coach, how to manage the band you want to see in practice, what you want to do. So he's been a great mentor for me that way. And I think he's got a great coaching career ahead of him because, he's played NCAA Division One. He's played, East Coast, a little bit in the A, and has that playing background as well to him. So just another guy that, I really have fun picking his brain about random things that
Yeah.
can pop up anytime.
Well, if you can't be a player,
Mhm.
coaching is a good second
Oh
to
yeah.
still be involved in that.
Mhm.
When you get all downhill, then you can have a podcast like this and still get involved.
Exactly.
So, all right. So let's talk about then. At what point did you? So, how did this thing come up about Sweden?
So, Leo Gerard, who's a coach in
Oh yeah.
Sweden, he runs that Got My Team
Yep. Let's
website.
put a plug in for Got My Team. So Leo's been on the podcast before. What a
Okay.
story he's got, right?
Yeah.
For people, I can't. So go back on our playlist and listen to that, and you'll find a young man that he's coaching J20 in Stockholm, in Sollentuna, I
Yeah.
believe it
Yeah.
is, and uh, has he's got the guts to go out and just call someone ambition, smart, personality to be able to say, I'm willing to work.
Yeah.
And then he started gotmyteam.com, which is a kind of how would you describe that?
It's
It's kind of
it's
a
connecting.
matchmaker for players and coaches, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And it's a phenomenal app. Like I was using it for 2 years now, and just getting in contact with teams. And for me as a coach, I was contacting teams, every couple weeks. So it's a phenomenal piece of equipment that you can use as a coach that you'd never really would expect 10 years ago. Um, but yeah, it's an unbelievable app.
Yeah. And they were posting about this particular job, or Boden, the GM at Boden was posting, we need a J20 coach.
Yeah, so last season, he actually posted one about the J20 club. And by the time I started talking with Chris Janssen, the junior manager here, it had already been filled and they offered me the J18 Division One. And I wasn't ready to leave J20 in Canada, U20
Yep.
in Canada for that. And so this summer it popped up again, and Chris and I started talking immediately. And um it was just kind of, started, I think, early July. And by August 1st, I had signed the contract and was packing my bags to come over to Sweden, which I wasn't expecting. Just the way that we had our conversations, he got me excited to, be a part of this program and move forward with it. So it was really exciting.
And talk about we'll talk about the club next, but your first impression when you got so you came over there in summer, right?
Yeah, about mid-August.
Yeah. Now you're coming from Canada and been in Saskatchewan, so the contrast may not be as big as if you're coming from Orlando, Florida.
Mhm. Honestly, like being in the north of Sweden here, I was kind of surprised because it reminds me a lot of the BC landscape,
Yep.
but I knew that there was going to be the Saskatchewan winter, so I
Yep.
knew I was getting kind of a good mix of both. So, but
So
when
so
I got,
so for those who are listening from Canada or from the US, Boden is way up north. So in the summertime when you got there, so did you get there? What time of year did you get there?
oh, it was still probably 15, 20 degrees Celsius. probably about 70 Fahrenheit and sunny days.
But
It's
was it
long,
July
long,
or
nice.
was it
No,
July? Or,
it was August there
okay,
here.
so
Yeah.
still, just like up way up north in Canada,
Mhm.
the sun barely goes down.
Yeah.
You're that far up north.
Yeah.
In the summertime, but if you're from Canada, you're probably used to some of that. But
Yeah, it's a little different now. I think now we get about 3, 4 hours of sun, and I'm a little lost some days, so it's pretty different. But I'm spending most of my days inside this office anyway, where
yeah,
you don't see much sun. So
yeah. So let's talk about your club now. So you got Nicholas, who's coaching the J18, helping you out with J20. Yeah, it's a team. It's a team within the organization, and you guys help each other out. But the A team, or the pro team, is
hockey eating.
in
Yeah.
in Hockeyettan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the pretty successful. I mean, it's not in a bottom team in Hockeyettan.
hmm No, they're I think first or second right now in the north here. So yeah.
Yeah. So how was that for you? Was that a little bit different coming in, where you have kind of this 18, 20 and Hockeyettan, and the uh, 18 and 20 is playing in J18 and J20 region, right?
hmm Yeah.
And so the difference, so you have the opportunity, your players to come in playing J20 region, have
hmm
the ability to practice with a Hockeyettan team as well. Not everybody, but
Yeah.
there's opportunities.
Yeah, and we've probably sent up 7 or 8 of our guys already this year just to practice. One of them, one of our D-men, Herman Janssen, he's been practicing, a couple times a week,
Yep.
every time. So, yeah, it's really good to have, this kind of structure with it with the J18, J20, and Hockey Eaton because we all run the same system, which,
Yep.
Joki Fagervall, he's a well-known Swedish coach. He's been everywhere and coached everything. So again, having another guy who just has hockey knowledge and stuff like that. So we run everything similar. Each team has their own little way of running it, but it's easy for players now to jump up levels or jump down and play throughout our program and understand that this is the way we expect to play at every level.
But your budget, so to speak, I mean, you have a thinner staff.
Mhm,
Compare yourself to Björklöven, who's Umeå, plays in
mhm,
Allsvenskan, long
mhm,
time tradition in there, even though they haven't been in the SHL for a long time. But as an organization, they have an NIU for gymnasium.
mhm.
Um, they've got facilities. They're in the second division and competing to make it up back up to SHL. But
Mhm.
you know, having a Hockeyettan and J20 region in Boden is not the same as being Allsvenskan and region in Björklöven.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely, they get, and especially just the bigger city of Umeå, the players have something other than hockey around them and the community's a little bit bigger and stuff. But I think we want to have that kind of organization and are working towards having that top tier organization here. And it's never going to be, overnight success. It's going to be over time and putting the people in the right place and bringing in, the right staff to do that. So I think there's moving on into those steps to make this the proper organization to develop players and develop program into something that can build one day and move up, maybe J20 national or J18 region, can be a top level team. And, the hockey Etten team can be Allsvenskan.
But isn't it for you as a J20 coach here? It gives you an advantage a little bit, because if you're Björklöven and you're playing in Allsvenskan, the jump between J20 region to Allsvenskan is a much bigger jump than what you have
Mm-hmm.
with and that's a symbiotic relationship where they don't have as big of a budget in Hockeyettan as in
Yeah.
Allsvenskan, and they really need that line or
Mhm.
3 or 4 players to be able to have development and also a smaller budget to be able to rely on, you know, frankly, players that you don't
Yeah.
have to pay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, for you, you can then say, man, it's the carrot to say, man, if you really bust it here, you're going to get promoted, and
Yeah.
that's going to be good for your career.
Yeah. And we tell our players, my guys all the time, it's if you want to, have a shot at the hockey eaton team, it's not always about the points, it's about how you play.
Yeah,
Because, you when you go up, if you get the chance, you're not going to go in and be a point guy. You're you're not going to make that jump to the pro hockey and just step in and be, a point a game player 15 games in. It's going to take you time to understand the level and understand the league. So you got to do your defensive habits good and move on that way. But as far as the organization with the jump to, the higher level, it's all about player development, I think, and giving players the opportunity to have those practices and see what it takes to play at that level.
yeah,
I do know that, Bjorklöven has some of their J20s that have played and practiced with their Allsvenskan team, which is going to help the J20 players understand what it takes to get to that level and move up. So, yeah, I think all around it's just player development, and if you do it properly, players should be able to jump, you know, a level or two higher, if they're doing the right things and if the organization is doing the right things.
so how would you now, let's kind of round this out with your, now you've got an experience in Switzerland, you've got an experience in the NOL, you've got an
Mhm.
experience in junior A in Canada and also USHL, and seen kind of all those levels. And then you see, because you guys are one of the top teams now in J20 region.
Mhm.
But what, it's difficult to compare the style of play,
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
versus the Canadian. Explain what your opinion of the difference in style of play compared to SJHL.
Honestly, the way I see it is more puck management. The Swedish game that I've seen has been more, if there's not a play, take it back, wait for the openings to come and go. Whereas that North American style is, all right, we're just gonna get it as deep as we can, forecheck hard, cycle low, keep those plays low, and force teams to play defense all night long.
Yep.
Whereas that the Swedish game that I've seen and coached has been, okay, let's relax, let's find our openings and play not so much a passive game, but more of a controlled game where you're focusing in systems and relying on systems to win hockey games rather than just beating someone into submission almost.
Did you did you were you tempted right away to go in and like, we want to forecheck hard and bang on the boards and try it?
I was tempted. I'd be
I mean,
lying if I
because
wasn't.
as a watching J20 region on a regular basis, to me there is a, that is the biggest difference to me is there's not a lot of hits,
Mhm.
right? And there's definitely a lot. There's not any chip and chase, and there's not any. I'm going to forecheck really really hard, and I don't know if that's just because the size of the rink is makes it too easy to break through that. I don't know. What's your opinion there?
I think that's exactly it. Is the players, I think that the players over in Sweden are very high skilled, and if you go too hard with your stick in the wrong spot, those players are finding those areas and they're able to slip the hits, and then all of a sudden it's a 5-on-4 and they're rushing up the ice quick and taking advantage. So I think
Yeah,
it's the way I coach my team is we want to break the ice in half, force them into areas where we can have those numbers and have that physical presence, and then get the hits and the pucks. And um, my team still plays a little bit of the chip and chase, but we try and place pucks behind D-men where we can have the first guy go get it rather than have our guy just run through the D-man in the wall down in the corner.
yeah,
So I'm trying to bring a little bit of my North American style, but make it work with the Swedish hockey player who's grown up with the Swedish style and knows that the Swedish style works in Sweden.
Yeah. How do you think that, because there's a lot of Swedish players that are tempted to go over and play in North America. I know that there's because of the restrictions being European, but what's the, how does the game translate for the Swedish players being in US or Canada?
It's tough because I feel like it's always easier going from a small rink to a big rink
Yeah.
because now you have more time, you have, more time with the puck, more time to skate around, more areas to find. Whereas you go the opposite way and you're running out of time too quick and you're not used to having a guy on you all the time and you have to find those lanes. But I do think that, there's a lot of North American or European players that go over to North America and find success because it's quicker.
Yeah.
Things are made quicker because you have no time. And, when you don't think, sometimes the best hockey IQ comes out. So I think that a lot of the players are able to do that and they're smart enough players in Sweden that when they go over, they're able to find those little areas that they can have success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
I
think
also
that
think
it's,
that Swedes are really good at protecting the puck. That's one thing that, we teach a lot in Canada and in the SJ and Notre Dame. We taught puck protection skills all day long. And most of the Europeans we had who would come to Notre Dame, they were really good at protecting the puck because you're taught that at a young age.
what about the issue here about the Swedish system of because I grew up here in the US from
Mhm.
a coaching perspective, and USA Hockey says basically, no, you can't play up. You can only play for your team. You got really strict restrictions on registrations, and you versus Sweden, who's very, very open with no, if you want to play down in J18, you can. If you want to play up to J20, you can. And there's very little restrictions and practice and
Mhm.
playing and
Mhm.
and so on. How does that? What's your thoughts on for the player who's like, I want more, feed me more?
I love that mentality. My opinion is it doesn't work in North America because there's too many kids that play, and you just want to keep everybody at that level in their bubbles so that, you don't get too many kids that are, playing ahead of themselves or, playing under with the weak league or something where
Yeah,
I think it's done proper over here in Sweden where you allow kids to take those steps, but not every kid is doing it. Where it's
yeah.
only a few are playing up and a few are playing down because of their level, and they can excel at that higher league, or maybe they don't excel at their level that they're at right now, and they need a little bit more development where they can get it playing a little bit lower.
But it gives you a lot of tools, right, as a coach
Hmm.
to be able to
Yeah.
say, both from a motivation, or you may see this guy like in your background where you're like, man, I really struggled at a time and
Hmm.
lost the fire, and
Hmm.
you got that fire back by playing at another level. And it
Hmm.
could be that you have a fourth liner that healthy scratch on the J20, and then you can send them down, and man, they get that confidence back, and
Hmm.
you know, and then all of a sudden you get a break or two, and now you kind of got over the hump.
Yeah. And I mean, in Bowden, we're lucky to have a Division 2 team as well. So we've sent probably six of our players from J20 to that Division 2 team where they're able to, play against men, but they're able to play with their game and get a little more minutes and have success that maybe they weren't getting at J20. And then all of a sudden, like you said, they come back and they have a little bit of confidence and they're doing things that they were scared to try before because they didn't have confidence in it. And I think that the way that, we're allowed to use our players for that rotation, if, J20 needs it or J18 needs a guy for practice, I'm happy to send a guy down and just get him some more reps and he can, try some things. He can figure out what works. If it doesn't work at that level, maybe it's probably not going to work at the J20 level. So they get that kind of jazz back in their game and they understand what works and what doesn't.
I think that that's a really big advantage that you have being in Boden, because not every team has that, uh, because of whatever, if you're playing in Frölunda, you're probably only going to be playing for that one team.
Yeah.
And you either are starting or you're scratched, or you may be in this role, versus the ability to have more options open. Isn't that kind of a recruiting advantage that you have, to be able to tell a guy that may be coming from Skåne and said, hey, here I have lots of options at my disposal where you're going to be able to, you're going to play somewhere,
Yeah.
whether it's here. And if you are top guy, you may be able to play for, Hockeyettan and you're going to have a big role here, versus being pigeonholed into, no, there's only so much spots for you.
And yeah, we definitely try and use that in our recruitment. We talked to a few players already that, maybe next year you're going to play J20 and you're going to have to play games with the J18s because you're still eligible. And, maybe you practice with Hockey Eaton as well. And if you're good enough, you can play. But we don't, see our organization as, I stick with my team, Nick sticks with his, and Yoki stays with his team. We want to use each other and develop our players as best we can, and give them their opportunities to be the best player that they can. And you don't do that by just keeping a kid at one level. You gotta, give them a chance to fail at the higher level, come back down, and okay, this is what I can do. This is how I have to play now.
Yeah.
Or they go down, are able to gain their confidence, play good, be a top minute player, power play, box play, all that stuff, and excel. And then they come back and they're okay, I can do this, I can do that. I need to block this shot here because now I know that I have to play box play or something.
Well, plus they can play for a Canadian coach. That's got to be high up there, right?
Yeah, it was interesting actually at the start when I was here, because none of the players came up to me, no one talked to me in English, and then it took probably 2 weeks, and guys started like talking to me in English, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, my English is bad," and they're speaking perfect English, and I'm confused at what they mean by their English is bad.
It is kind of a common trait. I can speak from experience with my son, first year over there, and there's a lot of people that are very nervous about, you have these clicks. You got some that are like, oh, it doesn't bother me at all. And then you got some that in reality speaks really good English. And then, but they're so self-conscious about using it.
Yeah.
So they don't, kind of thing. So, all right, well, let's round out here about two things. You're 29 now, but you meet yourself at 17. I ask this question to every guest here, but you meet yourself at 17. What advice would you give yourself? Not necessarily do things differently, but what advice would you give yourself, that things you know now that you didn't know at 17, that you wish in retrospect that you knew? So you sitting there on the bench after the game, and you got 12 years younger Dion here. What would you tell him?
It would probably be just give 100% in anything you do, whether it's life, hockey, whatever. Just go out. Don't worry about the mistakes. Just go out, give 100%, and whatever happens, happens. Because you can plan for anything, and that plan is just going to get shoved right back to you most of the time. So, just go out, live it to the fullest, and enjoy.
I would be curious, and never met your dad, but I would say that sounds a lot like your dad, right?
Probably close, yeah. Yeah, probably.
It's great.
That's pretty similar, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how that kind of comes around. All right, last thing. So we've got a partnership. I asked the same thing to Nicholas, but we have a partnership with Target Aid. Hopefully we can shine some light on awareness and attention with contents to all the clubs for fundraising and stuff like that. But we have an initiative, which is the Club in Your Heart, Klubben i mitt hjärta. So if you were going to say, this is the team in my heart, which one is it?
Outside of Boden?
It could be Boden.
Boden's the one that brought me to Sweden, so I gotta love Boden for that. So Boden's in my heart for sure.
Okay. If it wasn't Bowden, who would you say?
I gotta stick to the north. I'd say Luleå. I've
Okay.
really enjoyed, watching their games. I've been to a few J20 games. I've been to the SHL team. I actually know one of the girls on the female team there, so
One of the
gotta
top
stick it to them.
or the top team in the SDHL, right?
Yep,
I mean,
yep,
they've done an amazing job growing growing
hmm
that women's hockey there. An example for all the clubs, really.
yeah.
That's awesome. We'll stick. We'll see here. James Reason, who's my contact with Target Aid, I'm going to leave it up to him if he
All
decides.
right,
No, we need it. We need to put it in the bucket of Luleå.
there
Uh,
you go.
but thank you so much. It's been fun to kind of connect. Cool to have international spice up there in the north of Sweden, and we'll keep an eye on you. And same thing with Nicholas there, and this will come out. I've got a few episodes here in the hopper, so
Mhm.
it'll probably come out here about first of the year,
Sounds
and it'll
good.
be interesting to see because then the season will change, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are probably going to be in the top six moving on.
Yeah.
What?
Well, yeah. We just clinched the top four for the first half last night, so
Okay.
we're hoping now to have a good second half.
Yeah. So second half changes a little bit, so it gets
Mhm.
tougher, but
Yeah.
it's really about the opportunity to earn a spot in J20 National, which isn't impossible. Uh,
No, no, it's not. But a lot of work still needs to be done.
yeah.
So we'll see how we can do.
Yeah. Thanks a bunch, and we'll stay in touch for sure.